The sound of my grandfather's scream still wakes me at night. It wasn't just pain in his voice. It was terror, betrayal, and rage rolled into one. That night, under the glow of the porch light, I saw strangers dressed like officials twist his arm until it snapped. They wore reflective vests labeled HOA enforcement. But there was one problem. Our neighborhood didn't even have an HOA. They weren't officers. They were predators, and they broke my grandfather's body to feed their scam. I swore then and there they'd regret it, because they didn't know my family. It was just after midnight when the scream tore through the silence. I bolted outside barefoot, gravel digging into my feet but not slowing me down. The sight stopped me cold. 2 men in neon vests had my 8-year-old grandfather pinned to the driveway. One twisted his arm back until I heard the bones snap like dry wood. His cry cut through me. "Pay your dues, old man," one sneered, waving a clipboard like it meant something. My grandfather gasped in pain, clutching his wrist, collapsing onto the pavement. I froze for a split second. HOA? That was impossible. Our neighborhood never had one. These weren't officers. They were frauds. They strutted like they had authority, but all I saw were thugs with props. "You don't pay, this is what happens," the taller one said before shoving Grandpa and striding off into the night. I knelt beside him, tears blurring my vision, his arm bent at an angle no arm should ever bend. I whispered, "I'll get help." But inside, fury boiled. They hadn't just broken his bones. They'd broken something inside me too, and I wouldn't stop until I shattered them back. The hospital lights were harsh, the smell of antiseptic heavy in the air. My grandfather winced as doctors set his arm, the cast swallowing half of it. "It's a bad fracture," the doctor said grimly. "It'll take months." I held his good hand as tears streamed down my face. He was tougher than anyone I knew, but that night he looked fragile, pale, and old. When the room cleared, he squeezed my hand with trembling strength. "Don't let them do this to anyone else." His voice cracked with pain, but his eyes burned with determination. I nodded through clenched teeth. "I promise, Grandpa. They'll never touch another soul." But deep inside, I knew this wasn't something the police would handle fast enough. These weren't just petty thieves. They were predators feeding on fear. They picked the elderly because they thought no one would fight back. They were wrong. Because my family wasn't ordinary. I had cousins, men who lived by a code sharper than any law. Men who believed in loyalty, respect, and vengeance when pushed too far. And once they heard what happened, the fake HOA officers would discover the one rule you never break. You don't harm family. The next day, I made the call. My cousins rolled in before sunset, the rumble of their Harleys shaking the ground. They weren't men you ignored. Tall, leather-clad, eyes sharp like steel. At the head was Luke, broad-shouldered, his beard streaked with gray, his presence commanding silence. He didn't waste words. When I told him what happened, his fists clenched so tight his knuckles whitened. "They broke an old man's arm." His voice was low, dangerous. "Our uncle." He spat on the ground. "This isn't about revenge. It's about respect." The others nodded, their faces hard. These were bikers who lived rough, but their code was carved into their bones. Family above everything. "They'll be back," I told them. "They go door to door at night. They'll try again." Luke cracked his neck, a grim smile spreading across his face. "Then we'll be waiting." The plan wasn't reckless. It wasn't rage. It was strategy. They wouldn't just scare the scammers. They'd expose them, humiliate them, and make sure the whole neighborhood knew who really ran these streets. And when the engines roared to life, I felt it. The storm was coming. And this time, it wasn't fear the scammers would spread. Word spread fast. The so-called HOA would return Friday night. This time, they wouldn't be facing frightened homeowners. They'd be walking into a trap. My cousins planned every detail. They didn't want chaos, just precision. "We're not breaking laws," Luke reminded them. "We're breaking chains of fear." Friday evening came heavy with tension. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, whispering rumors of bikers assembling. By nightfall, The growl of motorcycles echoed through the neighborhood. One by one, engines filled the air like thunder rolling before a storm. I stood on the porch, my heart hammering. 12 bikers lined the street, black jackets gleaming under the streetlights, boots hitting the pavement in unison. Their Harleys idled, headlights cutting through the dark like eyes of predators. Children pressed faces against windows, neighbors holding their breath. For the first time in months, the neighborhood wasn't quiet from fear, it was quiet from anticipation. And then, right on schedule, the fake HOA truck rolled in. Headlights flashed, clipboards clutched tight. But when they saw the line of bikers waiting, their confidence faltered. They didn't know yet, but they just walked into their reckoning. The scammers stepped out, puffing up their chests, trying to project authority. But the clipboards in their trembling hands betrayed them. Luke stepped forward, his shadow swallowing the light. His voice was calm but razor-sharp. "You broke an old man's arm. My uncle. Tonight, you answer for it." The taller scammer smirked weakly. "We're official. We have authority." Before he could finish, one cousin yanked the vest off his shoulders and tossed it into the dirt. "Authority," he spat. "You've got nothing." Engines revved in unison, growling like caged beasts. The bikers formed a circle around the frauds, tightening it inch by inch. The scammers' faces paled, sweat dripping as neighbors peeked out. Still, they tried to bluff. "You touch us, you'll regret it." But the bikers didn't lay a finger on them. Instead, they stood silent, an unmovable wall of fury. The silence was heavier than violence, suffocating the scammers in their own lies. And then, one door opened. Then another. Families stepped out, emboldened by the bikers' presence. The scammers weren't facing two men anymore. They were facing an entire neighborhood, finally unafraid. Neighbors shouted accusations. "They threatened me," one man yelled. "They stole money from me," cried another. A woman stepped forward, holding photos of vandalism in her yard. The scammers' bluster collapsed as dozens of voices rose against them. Their victims, once silenced by fear, now stood tall. "We're calling the police," Luke announced, his voice steady. For the first time, the frauds had nowhere to run. Minutes later, squad cars arrived. Officers stepped out, instantly flooded with testimony, video clips, letters, and evidence the neighbors had been too scared to share before. The scammers sputtered excuses, but it was useless. Handcuffs clicked around their wrists, their fake vests lying shredded in the dirt. Fraud, assault, extortion. The charges stacked like bricks on their shoulders. As they were shoved into the cruisers, the bikers didn't cheer. They didn't gloat. They simply stood, arms crossed, the roar of their engines echoing like a warning through the night. The neighborhood erupted behind them. Applause, tears, relief. But the bikers stayed silent, a wall of leather and steel. Their message was clear. Justice wasn't loud. Justice was undeniable. Later that week, we wheeled Grandpa onto the porch. His cast was heavy, his face still pale, but when he saw the street, he smiled for the first time since that night. The bikers lined up in silence, engines quiet, helmets in hand. Luke stepped forward, knelt beside Grandpa's chair, and placed a hand on his shoulder. "We kept our promise," he said simply. Grandpa's eyes glistened. "You did more than that. You gave them back their courage." He was right. For months, neighbors had lived in fear. That night, they'd taken back their streets. They'd seen bullies fall and realized they weren't powerless anymore. As the bikers mounted their Harleys, the engines roared again, not as threats but as symbols of protection. Children waved, parents nodded in gratitude. I watched as the taillights disappeared into the night, the echo of thunder fading slowly. My chest swelled with pride. Because this wasn't just a story about broken bones or revenge. It was about family, loyalty, and standing up when no one else will. And I knew, deep down, if evil ever tried to crawl back into our neighborhood, my cousins would return.